Have you ever imagined waking up on Monday to discover your weekend marriage was already over? In Hollywood's golden era, this wasn't fantasy. It was headline news. Behind the glittering premieres and perfect publicity shots lay a shadow world of impulsive vows and hasty annulments, marriages measured not in years or even months, but in mere days or hours. What drove these luminaries of the silver screen to leap into matrimony only to flee it before the honeymoon ended? Was it passion, pressure, or the peculiar price of fame? Join us as we pull back the velvet curtain on 12 astonishing unions from Hollywood's golden age, marriages that flared like camera flashbulbs and extinguished just as quickly, leaving behind sensational headlines, broken hearts, and cautionary tales about the true cost of fleeting romance in Tinseltown. Jean Arthur. Our first story opens in 1928 at the height of the silent era. Radiant young star Jean Arthur, poised for stardom with her distinctive husky voice and captivating screen presence, slips away from the studio lot and secretly marries a handsome photographer named Julian Anker. Hollywood gossip later claims the marriage was over almost before it began, annulled within 24 hours. Why so fast? Jean's bosses at Paramount had carefully crafted her image as an independent ingenue. A husband, they feared, would tarnish the illusion. The studio had invested thousands in publicity photos and carefully manufactured stories about their rising star. In the calculated world of 1920s, Hollywood actresses were commodities whose personal lives were tightly controlled assets. As legend has it, when Jean impulsively said, "I do," studio executives practically hit the ceiling. By sunrise, under intense pressure, the bewildered actress and her new groom quietly agreed to annul. Jean returned to work the next morning as if nothing happened, a single woman in the eyes of the world once more. Picture Jean Arthur on that fateful night, a flicker of joy in her eyes as she exchanged vows in a little chapel, only to spend the next evening alone with a studio lawyer signing annulment papers. The contrast couldn't be more stark. Soft candlelight replaced by harsh office fluorescence, tender promises supplanted by legal jargon, a bridal bouquet wilting beside a stack of studio contracts. In public, Jean laughed off the incident for years. "I barely had time to change my name on my dressing room door," she once joked to a reporter. The official story: she was worth more at the box office, unattached. In private, it left a bittersweet lesson written on her heart. In Hollywood, the price of love could be one broken contract away. The experience scared Jean deeply. For decades afterward, she guarded her privacy with fierce determination, becoming one of Hollywood's most reclusive stars. When asked about romance in later interviews, she'd deflect with her trademark wit, but close friends noted how she'd sometimes fall silent, perhaps remembering that one brief day when she dared to put love before career, and how swiftly Hollywood's machinery had crushed that dream. Loretta Young's. Spring, 1930. 17-year-old Loretta Young, a devout Catholic and rising starlet with luminous eyes and an ethereal beauty, falls headlong in love with her co-star, Grant Withers. He's 26, dashing, and equally smitten. Their chemistry ignites while filming The Second Floor Mystery, and soon passionate whispers between takes evolve into furtive plans. Her family disapproves. The studio threatens. Their solution: an elopement as dramatic as any plot twist, flying off to Arizona under cover of night. They marry in a blink and you'll miss it ceremony, with only a drowsy courthouse clerk as witness. But the honeymoon didn't last past the weekend. Against a dawn desert sky, the newlyweds returned to Hollywood hoping for parental blessing. Instead, Loretta's outraged mother, Gladys, herself a former actress who knew all too well the perils of impetuous romance, marches them straight to court. The air is thick with tension as lawyers huddle and papers shuffle. Loretta was underage, and no marriage would stand without parental consent. Within hours of touching back down in Tinseltown, the union is annulled, wiped away as if it never happened. The teenage bride is whisked back home, her Cinderella adventure over before Monday morning. Grant Withers, heartbroken and humiliated, drives off into the night. In a tragic epilogue to this brief romance, he loses control of his car amid turmoil, crashing in a haze of tears and whiskey. 4 bystanders are injured, and Grant's own spirit is crushed. The incident makes the inside pages of Variety a sensational coda to a marriage that barely existed. Loretta, shielded by the studio and her strict family, slips back into her wholesome on-screen persona. The scandal is smoothed over with strategic publicity, photos of her attending Mass with her mother, interviews where she speaks demurely about lessons learned, a charitable appearance at a children's hospital. To the public, Miss Young was as virtuous as ever. But behind her angelic smile lay the memory of a wild weekend when love defied the rules, and how swiftly Hollywood and family combined to bring that runaway romance to heel. Years later, when Loretta Young had become a television icon and grande dame of Hollywood, she rarely spoke of this youthful indiscretion. When pressed, she would simply say with quiet dignity, "Sometimes the heart speaks before wisdom has a chance to whisper." The marriage that vanished in a weekend had taught her valuable lessons about impulse, patience, and the heavy price of defying convention in the merciless spotlight of fame. Ginger Rogers. In 1929, the jazz age was in full swing, and Ginger Rogers is a 17-year-old dancing dynamo touring the vaudeville circuit. With bobbed hair bouncing and quick feet tapping out rhythms that would soon enchant the nation, Ginger is on the cusp of greatness, though she doesn't know it yet. She meets fellow performer Jack Pepper, a charming singer twice her age with slick-backed hair and a voice like honey, and sparks fly fast, maybe too fast. One March afternoon in New Orleans, with youthful bravado, Ginger swaps her tap shoes for wedding shoes. They elope in a heartbeat, becoming Ginger and Pepper, both on stage and off. But the spice of this union didn't last the weekend. At first, it's magical. The newlyweds headlining small-town theaters, sharing laughs under cheap marquee lights. Ginger's diary from those days, later revealed in biographies, bubbles with excitement. Jack sang, "You're the cream in my coffee," directly to me tonight. The audience swooned, but not as much as I did. They dance until dawn in speakeasies, dreaming of Broadway glory between stolen kisses. But as the summer wears on, reality sets in. They're just kids playing house between one-night stands on the road. Bills mount, bookings falter, backstage fights flare over money and Ginger's ambitions. Hollywood is calling her name, and Ginger refuses to be tied down. By autumn, mere months later, Ginger boards a train to California, alone. Jack pleads for her to stay, even following her to the station in a dramatic scene worthy of the pictures she hopes to make. But Ginger's mind is set. The marriage, effectively over, limps on paper until a quiet divorce in 1931. Imagine Ginger on that train, her wedding ring tucked away in a velvet pouch, determination in her eyes. At every whistle stop, she practices lines and dance steps, shedding the role of wife as easily as a costume change. Through the window, she watches America roll by, flat farmlands giving way to mountains, then desert, each mile carrying her further from Mrs. Pepper and closer to the movie star she yearns to become. Jack Pepper becomes a footnote in her meteoric rise. Years later, when Ginger Rogers waltzes across cinema screens with Fred Astaire, few recall the youthful folly that briefly made her a wife. In rare interviews where the subject arose, Ginger would dismiss it with characteristic spunk. Marriage should be a duet, not a solo with accompaniment. Her first marriage was a fever dream of the roaring 20s, here on Friday, gone by Monday, and chalked up to the recklessness of youth chasing fame. Gloria Swanson's Hollywood 1916. 17-year-old Gloria Swanson, already a glittering silent film star with penetrating eyes and imperious poise, believes she's found true love with comedic actor Wallace Beery. 15 years her senior, Beery courts her with an intensity that sweeps the teenager off her feet. On her birthday, she dons a simple suit and joins him at the altar, stars in her eyes and dreams of domestic bliss filling her young heart. But this is no fairy tale. It's a horror story. By the end of their wedding night, Gloria's golden dream has curdled into a Hollywood nightmare that lasts scarcely longer than a weekend. Hours after saying, "I do," Gloria sits trembling in a hotel room at the Alexandria Hotel in downtown Los Angeles. Wallace Beery, celebrating a little too hard, has turned from jovial to brutish. He forces champagne on his young bride until her head spins, insisting she drink toast after toast, deaf to her pleas to stop. The luxurious hotel suite, with its heavy velvet drapes and ornate furniture, becomes a gilded cage as the evening darkens. What happened next, Gloria later recounted with shuddering clarity in her memoir, Swanson on Swanson. Her new husband's touch turned violent. The night that should have been bliss became an ordeal of pain and fear. "I was a virgin," she wrote, "and he knew it. What he did to me on our wedding night was criminal." By sunrise, Gloria feels trapped, disillusioned, and desperate to escape. Yet, the era's morality and studio pressures chain her to this mistake. Weeks later, Gloria discovers she's pregnant. Her heart races with conflicting emotions: hope that motherhood might somehow salvage this broken marriage, fear of what Beery might do next. Wallace, panicking at the prospect of fatherhood, cruelly slips her a potion he claims will help her nerves. Instead, it causes her to miscarry, alone and in agony, while he's out drinking with friends. In that agonizing moment, something in Gloria's spirit breaks forever. Her dreams of creating a family shattered along with her faith in men. Gathering the remnants of her courage, she flees from Beery's grasp. Though legal divorce would take 2 long years in court, their marriage was in truth dead on arrival. Gloria throws herself into her work with renewed passion. Every role is an escape from personal trauma, every close-up a chance to show the world only what she wants them to see. In the annals of Hollywood, few weekends were as harrowing as Gloria Swanson's honeymoon from hell. It exposed a dark reality behind Tinseltown's tinsel, that fame and fortune offered no protection from private suffering. The press eventually got wind of the split, but not the grim details. Those emerged decades later in memoirs. Headlines focused instead on Swanson's growing star power and Beery's fading career. To the world, Gloria carried on a vision of strength and glamour who would later command million-dollar contracts and define an era of cinema. But one of the silver screen's brightest stars had learned in just a single tragic weekend that not all that glitters is love, and that sometimes the cruelest monsters aren't on celluloid, but sharing your bed. Bela Lugosi. October 1929. The stock market isn't the only thing crashing. So is the whirlwind marriage of horror icon Bela Lugosi. Fresh from his triumph as Dracula on stage, with his thick Hungarian accent and hypnotic gaze captivating American audiences, Lugosi sinks his fangs into high society by wooing wealthy San Francisco widow Beatrice Weeks. Their courtship is a lightning strike. Within days of meeting at a Hollywood party where Lugosi arrived fashionably late in full evening dress, they wed in an extravagant ceremony. She, dazzled by his European charm and theatrical intensity. He, possibly entranced by her considerable fortune and social connections. It was all champagne and roses, for about 3 days to be exact. By day 4, the Gothic romance had turned positively ghoulish. Beatrice discovers unsettling rumors linking her new husband to another Hollywood it girl, none other than Clara Bow, the red-haired siren of the silver screen, whose wild reputation had earned her the nickname the Brooklyn Bonfire. Hotel staff whisper about late-night visits. A maid reports finding a distinctive lipstick shade on Bella's collar, and there's talk of intimate dinners at secluded restaurants. Whispers swirl that Bella's heart was still entangled with Clara, that he'd married on the rebound after Clara rejected his proposal the month before. Feeling duped and humiliated, Beatrice explodes. Their palatial San Francisco mansion echoes with accusations and denials. Crystal shatters against walls. Servants discreetly vanish into side rooms. A public scandal erupts when she files for divorce before the ink dries on the license, citing Clara Bow as the other woman. Los Angeles tabloids have a field day. Dracula's 3-day marriage bites the dust. They roar. Widow flees vampire's clutches, screams another. Paparazzi stake out court, catching Bela looking pale, even for him, as he exits the annulment hearing. The debonair actor who frightened audiences as a bloodthirsty count now finds himself cast as the villain in a real-life melodrama. He pleads that it was all a misunderstanding, but Beatrice isn't hearing it. Picture the courtroom, Beatrice Weeks in pearls and a pillbox hat, testifying that her matrimony was over by the weekend's end, and Lugosi, dapper but distressed in an impeccably tailored suit, realizing this isn't a role he can simply exit when the director yells, "Cut." His accent grows thicker under stress as he attempts to salvage his dignity. In the end, the judge grants an annulment, freeing them from their brief vows with a bang of the gavel that echoes like a coffin lid slamming shut. Bela Lugosi walks away alone into the Los Angeles dusk, his pride wounded, but his image intact, perhaps even enhanced by this dash of real-life drama. Clara Bow, when cornered by reporters outside the legendary Coconut Grove nightclub, merely tosses her famous red curls and laughs. Honey, if I'd wanted him, would he have gotten to the altar with someone else? This bizarre episode would become a mere footnote in his legend, a reminder that even monsters on the screen can make mistakes in the name of love, mistakes that vanish as swiftly as a vampire at sunrise. But Lugosi's fatal attraction to wealth and status would persist through multiple marriages, each one progressively less glamorous than the last. Mae West's. Long before she purred, "Come up and see me sometime," Mae West harbored a secret that only came to light decades later. In 1911, Mae was an ambitious vaudeville teen with big dreams and a bigger attitude. With her curvaceous figure and brassy confidence, the 17-year-old Brooklyn girl was already making waves on the East Coast stage circuit. At just 17, she dared to do the unthinkable, slip off to Milwaukee and marry a fellow performer, Frank Wallace. The union was furtive, a quick exchange of vows with no fanfare. By the end of that weekend, Mae West was not only a rising stage star, she was also a wife. It turned out she had no intention of staying one. For a few weeks, Mae and Frank played gigs as a husband and wife act on dusty Midwestern stages. Billing themselves as the Singing Wallaces, they belted out popular tunes, while Mae secretly plotted bigger things. Frank saw their partnership as both marital and professional, a lifetime collaboration built on shared applause. But Mae's eye was fixed on solo stardom, and nothing, not even a husband, would hold her back. She began booking separate engagements, forgetting to include Frank in her plans. She parted ways with Frank almost as fast as she'd wed him, vanishing down separate tracks on the vaudeville circuit. They never lived as a married couple in any true sense. When Frank sent increasingly desperate letters to Mae's mother's address, they returned unopened. In fact, Mae buried the episode so completely that by the time she hit Hollywood in the 1920s, it was as if Frank Wallace never existed. She reinvented herself as Mae West, sex symbol extraordinaire, with no romantic past to complicate her rise. And indeed, to 1930s movie fans and Hollywood bigwigs, Mae West was gloriously single, a sultry, sassy symbol of on-screen independence who wrote her own scandalous dialogue and refused to be tamed by the studio system. She flirted outrageously and crafted an image of a devilish diva unattached to any man. "Marriage is a great institution," she famously quipped, "but I'm not ready for an institution." It wasn't until 1935, at the peak of her fame, that a curious reporter unearthed a marriage certificate in Milwaukee's files. The press exploded. Mae West, the infamous sex symbol, had been a teen bride. For days, headlines screamed about her secret husband, while Frank Wallace, now a struggling nightclub performer, suddenly found himself in the spotlight. He confirmed the marriage and even attempted to visit Mae on set at Paramount, only to be turned away by burly security guards. Mae met the revelation with a quip and a shrug, insisting the long-ago fling meant nothing. "Marriage is like a book," she told reporters while twirling a feather boa. "I just skipped to the last chapter." She promptly arranged a legal divorce to tidy up the past, but refused to meet with Frank or acknowledge him beyond what lawyers required. The truth was, Mae had outgrown that "I do" almost the moment she said it. Her secret weekend wedding was a youthful indiscretion. She kept locked in the attic of her memory a brief misstep in a career built on careful calculation. When asked later if she'd ever marry again, Mae smirked, "I've been in who's who, but I know what's what." For Mae West, one weekend as Mrs. Wallace was enough to convince her that she'd rather be single and sensational than wed and tamed. Carol Landis. Our next tale takes us to 1934 in sunny California, where a starry-eyed schoolgirl named Carol Landis is about to make a desperate bid for grown-up happiness. At just 15, Carol was a knockout beauty with Hollywood aspirations. a blonde bombshell waiting to happen. Already dropping out of San Bernardino High School to pursue modeling jobs and bit parts, Carol felt ages older than her birth certificate suggested. But before the movies came calling, she did something bold. She ran off with her 19-year-old sweetheart, Irving Wheeler, and tied the knot. For a brief, giddy moment, Carol was living a romance straight out of a movie script. Then reality, and Carol's formidable mother, intervened with breathtaking speed. The teenage newlyweds had barely cut the cake when Carol's mother discovered the elopement. The wedding night was spent in a modest motor lodge outside Riverside, with Carol unpinning her home-styled wedding hairdo, while Irving nervously counted their combined savings, barely enough for a week's rent. Dreams of creating their own home quickly collided with financial reality. Irving's job as a car salesman paid little, and Carol's modeling gigs were sporadic at best. Aghast that her underage daughter had married in secret, Mom swept in like a force of nature. Think Joan Crawford in her most intimidating maternal role. Alternating between tears and threats, she convinced her daughter this rash decision would destroy her chances at stardom. "No studio wants a married teenager," she insisted, waving a Hollywood magazine profiling unmarried starlets. Within a month, she convinced a judge to annul the marriage on grounds of Carol's age. The young bride came from Mrs. Wheeler back to Miss Landis in record time, her happily ever after snuffed out in a courthouse before it even had a chance to start. What did Carol do? She dusted herself off and focused on her real dream, Hollywood. With her mother now acting as her unofficial manager, Carol dyed her hair platinum blonde and hit every casting call she could find. The strategy worked by 1937. She'd carved out a niche as a fresh-faced actress, her teenage rebellion all but forgotten by the public. Studio publicists crafted a wholesome biography that conveniently erased her brief marriage, replacing it with tales of innocent soda shop dates and chaperoned dances. But the story doesn't quite end there. In a twist worthy of an MGM melodrama, Carol reunited with Irving Wheeler when she turned 18 and married him a second time. Perhaps she wanted to prove their love wasn't just puppy love after all, or maybe she was thumbing her nose at all who doubted them. The studio was horrified, but by then Carol had enough clout to ignore their protests, at least temporarily. Sadly, even round two was short-lived. They quarreled over her increasingly demanding schedule and divorced for good a few years later. Irving later told friends that Carol had outgrown him as her star ascended. Carol Landis's youthful romantic misadventures were an open secret in Hollywood circles. She was known as the girl who married on a whim and took it back just as quickly, then tried again for good measure. In private, she collected romantic novels and matrimonial guides as if studying the institution that had twice eluded her. In those early days, Carol learned that life rarely mirrored the tidy endings of the movies she longed to star in. Her teenage heartache became fuel for her performances. Behind each dazzling smile on screen was a young woman who had tasted adult sorrow far too soon. Tragically, Carol would go on to have several more failed marriages before her life ended in suicide at just 29. Her weekend marriage was a brief flicker, annulled almost as swiftly as it began, but it foreshadowed a turbulent life to come to a town where love and ambition rarely play nicely together. Margaret Sullivan and Henry Fonda. The year is 1931. On the quiet shores of Cape Cod, two stage actors find themselves entangled in a passionate summer stock romance. Margaret Sullivan, mercurial and magnetic, with her distinctive husky voice and penetrating intelligence, and Henry Fonda, earnest and shy, with those distinctive cheekbones and gangly charm, are both in their early 20s, dreaming of Broadway and beyond. Under the spell of salt air and spotlight nights, they fall head over heels while performing in a seaside theater company. They rehearse their lines by day and whisper dreams by moonlight, walking barefoot along the shore as waves lap at their ankles. In a burst of youthful enthusiasm, they exchange vows before summer's end in a simple ceremony on the beach. For one brief season, the future Hollywood legends are Mr. and Mrs., but their marriage would barely outlast the warm weather. After a simple ceremony witnessed by a handful of theater friends, Margaret in a borrowed dress with wildflowers in her hair, Henry nervous but beaming in his one good suit, the newlyweds attempt domestic bliss in a tiny New England cottage. Salt air breezes through open windows as they create their first home together. She cooks tomato soup on a hot plate. He memorizes lines at the kitchen table. They furnish their quarters with cast-offs from the theater's prop department, a wobbly table, mismatched chairs, and a brass bed that squeaks with every movement. But as autumn arrives, cracks appear. The cozy cottage grows claustrophobic as summer warmth gives way to chilly nights. Margaret's fiery independence clashes with Henry's Midwestern steadiness. They're both headstrong artists, more alike than either realized, and neither ready to compromise. Soon, petty squabbles turn into frosty silences. She wants to tackle edgy dramatic roles. He's drawn to more traditional parts. She stays up all night, chain-smoking and pacing. He needs quiet and order. By the time the leaves turn, the honeymoon is decidedly over. Come winter, Margaret decamps for Broadway, her talent landing her an immediate starring role that Henry, still struggling to find his theatrical footing, can't match. He heads back to his family in Nebraska, each pursuing their career separately. Letters dwindle from daily to weekly to monthly. Their impulsive union, born under the footlights, quietly dissolves in a New York courtroom just a couple of months later. Few in Hollywood even knew they'd been married when both Sullivan and Fonda made their film debuts a short time afterward. There's a poetic epilogue to this gentle, short-lived marriage. Unlike many of our stories, Margaret and Henry remained fond friends after their split, even starring together in films years later. On the set of The Moon's Our Home in 1936, they played romantic leads with a chemistry that had audiences buzzing. Between takes, they'd share private jokes and reminisce about their summer by the sea. They'd smile knowingly in each other's company, sharing a bond born of a youthful love that simply wasn't meant to last beyond that golden summer. In later years, when both had achieved significant Hollywood success, they would occasionally find themselves at the same industry events. Witnesses described watching them across crowded rooms, making eye contact, raising a glass of silent toast to what once was. In Hollywood's annals, their weekend marriage stands as a tender reminder that sometimes even the brightest stars burn out quickly, leaving behind the memory of a lovely, if fleeting, glow. Zsa Gabor's. Even in a list of brief marriages, Zsa Gabor manages to steal the show. By 1982, the Hungarian glamour queen, a true golden age socialite and actress, with her trademark diamond accessories and provocative purr, had been married and divorced so many times that jokes were made she only dated men she could call Da Link. But nothing tops her one-day marriage to a man named Felipe de Alba, a union so short it practically requires a stopwatch. It happened on a whim aboard a yacht off the coast of California. The Las Brisas, a gleaming 118-foot vessel owned by a Mexican shipping magnate, bobbed gently on Pacific waters as Zsa prepared for her 9th wedding. The ink was barely dry on Zsa's 7th divorce from her previous husband when she decided to celebrate her newfound freedom by instantly saying, "I do" again. The lucky fellow, Felipe de Alba, a charming Mexican lawyer and occasional actor with salt and pepper hair and impeccable manners. With the Pacific breeze blowing and a few close friends as witnesses, Zsa became a bride for the 9th time in a ceremony that was equal parts spontaneity and spectacle. The bride wore white Chanel and dripped with diamonds. The groom sported a captain's hat for the occasion. Champagne flowed freely as the small wedding party cruised along the California coastline. "Marriage is like a souffle," Zsa reportedly quipped during the ceremony. "You must not let it fall." Little did she know how prophetic those words would be. The next morning, headlines blared about Gabor's surprise wedding. But by sunset, the plot twist arrived. It turned out the divorce papers from her prior marriage to Michael O'Hara hadn't been properly finalized due to a clerical error at the Los Angeles County Courthouse. In the eyes of the law, Zsa was still a married woman when she wed Felipe. Oops. The second this legal hiccup came to light, the new marriage was annulled within 24 hours. Zsa, never one to miss a comedic beat, quipped that she was a bride at breakfast and single by supper. Picture Zsa that evening, draped in diamonds, raising a glass of champagne in her Beverly Hills mansion as she toasts to her own record-breaking nuptials. "Here's to my shortest marriage, Da Link. It didn't even last as long as a Hollywood premiere." The world laughed and nodded, Only Zaza could turn matrimonial mishap into high farce. Photographers clamored for shots of the glamorous almost bride, who happily posed in her Beverly Hills garden, pretending to tear up wedding photos for maximum dramatic effect. In the end, her one-day husband went as quickly as he came, and Miss Gabor sashayed on, ever fabulous, adding yet another chapter to her legend of love 'em and leave 'em. When asked if she'd try again with Felipe once her previous divorce was properly finalized, Zaza merely shrugged. "I am a marvelous housekeeper," she told the press with a wink. "Every time I leave a man, I keep his house." Felipe de Alba, perhaps wisely, went back to Mexico in his law practice, leaving Zaza to plan wedding number 10 with hardly a pause, Ethel Merman and Ernest Borgnine. In the summer of 1964, Broadway's brassy belter Ethel Merman and Hollywood's lovable tough guy Ernest Borgnine shocked Tinseltown by falling madly in love. It seemed like a match made in showbiz heaven. She, the stage queen with a voice that could shake the rafters and a personality just as powerful, and he, the brawny Oscar-winning actor with a heart of gold and that distinctive gap-toothed grin. After a whirlwind courtship conducted between her Broadway performances and his Hollywood film shoots, they married in a whirlwind ceremony on June 27, 1964. But by the time August rolled around, this marriage had hit the final curtain after a tumultuous 32 days. At first, the pair were inseparable, beaming at cameras and slow dancing at nightclubs like El Morocco and the Stork Club. Friends described them as like teenagers, holding hands over candlelit dinners and calling each other sickeningly sweet nicknames. Ethel even considered cutting back on her Broadway commitments to spend more time in Hollywood with her new husband. They joked that life was some enchanted evening, a nod to the musical South Pacific. But privately, trouble brewed almost immediately on their honeymoon. Two outsized personalities collided. Ethel's penchant for being the star of every room didn't sit well with Ernie's pride. One story has it that during their vacation in Asia, fans swarmed Borgnine for autographs, ignoring Merman, and the indignant diva did not appreciate playing second fiddle. "Who do they think I am, luggage?" she reportedly snapped. Another time, at a Tokyo restaurant, Ernie attempted to order for both of them a chivalrous gesture in his mind, but to fiercely independent Ethel, an unforgivable slight. Other whispers say their tempers simply proved incompatible. Their shouting matches could be heard through the hotel walls. Ethel, accustomed to projecting to the back row of theaters without a microphone, naturally had volume to spare when angry. Borgnine could give as good as he got. His Navy years had given him a colorful vocabulary that shocked even Merman, no shrinking violet herself. Back in Hollywood, reality set in with a vengeance. The couple bickered over everything from home decor to which invitations to accept. After one especially heated quarrel, involving tossed barbs sharper than any script, Ethel had enough. On the 32nd day of wedded bliss, she walked out, leaving Ernie in stunned silence. In her trademark wry style, Merman later devoted an entire chapter of her autobiography to this marriage, a chapter that consisted of a single blank page. That silent zinger spoke volumes. Sometimes there's just nothing good to say. When reporters pressed Borgnine for comment, the gruff actor could only shake his head and mutter, "Big mistake." Ethel, with a roll of her eyes, quipped, "We were both less than we expected." She promptly returned to Broadway, throwing herself into performances with renewed vigor while he buried himself in film roles. Both eventually married again, but neither ever spoke at length about their brief, catastrophic union. And so ended the brief, blazing union of two Hollywood heavyweights. In the grand theater of love, their marriage was a one-act play, loud, dramatic, and almost as soon as it began, a misadventure neither star would ever forget. Mamie Van Doren's. 1950 in Hollywood. The post-war boom is in full swing, and a young blonde bombshell named Mamie Van Doren is being groomed as the next big star. With her platinum hair, hourglass figure, and striking resemblance to Marilyn Monroe, Mamie is Universal Studios' answer to 20th Century Fox's greatest asset. At 18, Mamie has the world at her feet and suitors lining up around the block. Swept off by a smooth-talking businessman, Jack Newman, she finds herself saying yes to more than just a movie contract. They marry in a small civil ceremony at Beverly Hills City Hall, with only a secretary and janitor as witnesses. And for Mamie, it feels like a scene from a romantic film, until the director yells, "Cut far too soon." This marriage barely made it 37 days before it came tumbling down. At first, playing house is a lark. Mamie puts her budding career on pause to try on the role of doting wife. She cooks breakfast in high heels and pearls, trying to be the picture-perfect 1950s spouse. Their small apartment becomes her temporary stage as she plays house with earnest enthusiasm. "I tried so hard to be June Cleaver before June Cleaver existed," she later confessed in interviews. But domestic life isn't all it's cracked up to be for a free-spirited girl with big Hollywood dreams. Jack expects Mamie to give up the limelight and be home for dinner, exactly what Mamie's not willing to do. The first arguments are quiet, then loud. By the fifth week, they're downright operatic. The breaking point comes when Universal Pictures calls with an opportunity for a screen test opposite Tony Curtis. Jack forbids her to go, insisting his wife won't be parading around in bathing suits for other men. Mamie, staring at the telephone after he slams out, makes her choice in that moment. On day 37, Mamie makes a decision. She wants out. Some say she marched straight to court herself. Others whisper that the studio intervened, not wanting their starlet tied down. Either way, an annulment is granted before the ink on the marriage certificate is even dry. Mamie reverts to her single status with a sigh of relief and a cheeky grin for the press, joking that she had a nice honeymoon and that's about it. The studio publicity department works overtime, spinning the brief marriage as a youthful mistake while positioning Mamie as Hollywood's newest available sex symbol. Fan magazines publish staged photos of her looking wistful yet glamorous at soda fountains, surrounded by admiring young men, but supposedly too career-focused to settle down again soon. Her first film role after the split has her playing, ironically, a wayward wife who learns her lesson. In true Hollywood fashion, Mamie Van Doren treated her brief marriage as just another plot twist in her larger-than-life saga. She'd go on to capitalize on her sex symbol image in films and publicity, often playing characters as daring and independent as she was. When asked later about Mr. Newman, Mamie chuckled and drawled, "Darling, we were married on a dare and divorced on a whim." Her 37-day fling was a tiny detour on the road to stardom, proof that a weekend wedding couldn't pin down a woman determined to shine on her own. Marie McDonald's. Our final tale of fleeting matrimony takes us to the 1940s Hollywood and the life of a curvaceous young starlet, nicknamed The Body, Marie McDonald. With measurements that rivaled Betty Grable's and an ambition to match, 17-year-old Marie was making waves in nightclubs and beauty pageants. Her voluptuous figure and delicate features had already earned her small roles in films like It Started with Eve, though stardom remained frustratingly elusive. Caught up in a whirlwind of moonlight and promises, she eloped in 1940 with a small-time actor, Richard Allord. They thought it was true love. The studio bosses thought otherwise. After a grand total of 3 weeks, Marie's first crack at marriage was over, another casualty of Hollywood's relentless machine. It all started so sweetly. One summer night, Marie and Richard exchanged vows in a quick Las Vegas chapel ceremony, then checked into the Hollywood Plaza Hotel as newlyweds ready to conquer the world. No parents, no witnesses, just 2 kids with stars in their eyes and SAG cards in their wallets. For a moment, Marie relished normalcy, cooking canned soup on a hot plate, giggling as she signed her new last name. But outside their honeymoon bubble, powerful forces were stirring. Marie's burgeoning career was being carefully orchestrated by studio executives who had big plans for The Body. A husband, especially an unremarkable one, was seen as bad for the box office. Studio publicists had been crafting a specific image for Marie, the bombshell next door, attainable yet untouchable. They arranged dates with eligible bachelors and manufactured romances with up-and-coming actors, all carefully staged for maximum publicity. Richard Allord wasn't part of the plan. He wasn't handsome enough to be leading man material, not famous enough to boost Marie's profile, just a journeyman actor with a handful of uncredited roles to his name. Soon, rumors of Marie's secret marriage reached the front office. A secretary spotted the wedding band Marie had forgotten to remove before a costume fitting. Contracts in those days had moral clauses and sneaky fine print. The studio summoned Marie. This marriage had to go fast. Torn between young love and the promise of stardom, Marie bowed to her career. With a heavy heart, she agreed to an annulment. Just 21 days after saying "I do," she said "I don't" anymore in front of a judge. The marriage was quietly erased from legal existence. Marie McDonald emerged from court teary-eyed but resolute. She strutted right back into the limelight, playing up her single bombshell persona for adoring fans. Publicity photos showed her poolside in fashionable swimwear, never hinting at the heartache beneath the smile. In public, she joked about being married to the movies and let the studio publicists spin her image of carefree glamour. She once told a fan magazine, "Why settle for one leading man when I can have a different one in every picture?" But behind closed doors, she kept a memento of that short-lived union. Perhaps a pressed flower from her wedding bouquet, or the hotel key from their brief honeymoon hideaway. Richard Allord faded into obscurity, eventually leaving Hollywood altogether for a steady job selling insurance in the Midwest. It was a tender reminder of the normal life she'd sacrificed. For Marie, 3 weeks as a wife showed her just how stark the choice in Hollywood could be: love or fame, but rarely both for long. What endures from these almost forgotten romances isn't bitterness or regret, but the lessons and legends they left behind. We chuckle at Zia's audacity, sigh at Loretta's youthful defiance, and shake our heads at the studios that thought a single starlet couldn't be a married woman. Hollywood has changed, but the allure of a whirlwind romance and the risk of its collapse is as old as Cupid himself. If you've enjoyed this peek into Tinseltown's secret history of "I do, oops, I didn't," be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible true stories. Until next time, keep the past in your heart, the future in your sights, and remember, in Hollywood, the biggest love story can sometimes last only a weekend. Thanks for watching.